I do want to echo Father Mark's comments from last night, although it's a more sober, somber day, of the warmth of heart that it brings to see all of you here. And I know we're not at full capacity, but to see, the fullness of what we're able to in our limited ability, and the fact that we're doing another service tonight. And just especially those who've been away. It's just a real blessing to see you, and not that those of you who have been around, we don't appreciate, right? But certainly to see everybody, but to see people getting more comfortable and seeing us move forward. So I do want to mention too, we did a great Bible study back in January called No Greater Love, and it really makes these days come even more alive. It's a great book that Dr. Edward Shree wrote. Encourage you to check it out, even if you're not able to do the Bible study. Really remarkable in helping you go deeper into appreciating and understanding these moments of the Passion. There was a painting that helped me to do that as well. A painting that back when on my first retreat that I ever led for adults, when I was a young 24 years old, and I was the interim director of youth ministry before I entered the seminary. And this painting that I used, it was actually a friend of mine's that I borrowed. It was called The Return from Calvary. It's by a painter named Herbert Schmaltz. Actually did it in England back in 1891. And the picture depicts the group that would have been at the foot of the cross leaving Calvary. In a sense, not just leaving the Calvary itself, but actually being on the other side of Jerusalem. It's from the perspective of them being on the Mount of Olives, looking, and you could see Jerusalem in the background, and way in the background of the picture is the hill of Calvary and the three crosses that are empty. And Mary's kind of stepping forward up these steps, because Mount Olives on the eastern side, remember, was a hill they had to go to leave Jerusalem from that side, being held by John, but he's looking back at Calvary. There's a few other women there, some looking back, some moving forward. And I remember inviting the retreatants that day to try to picture kind of who they can connect to or kind of relate to in this picture, or even beyond that, in this story of Calvary that we just heard again. We heard it on Sunday, we participated in it again today. And this idea of the, and you know that that's something I do regularly beyond that. So we can only imagine what they were feeling. And in kind of that Ignatian spirituality, in which we do inject ourselves into the story, especially into the Gospels, I would say, who would we relate to today? And there's so many options, so many roles, so many individuals that we might be able to connect to in the Passion story. You think about on the side of goodness, who you might relate to. Jesus himself, carrying the cross, our own suffering, our own struggles. Would it be our Blessed Mother Mary, as you walk with a close family member as they suffer or approach death, and you wish you could take their place? Or St. John, the beloved disciple, maybe, as you walk with a close friend who's dealing with a heavy load, possibly addiction, mental illness, or whatever other strife. Or maybe Veronica or Simon of Cyrene. We don't hear about them in the Passion today, but we know they're part of the Stations of the Cross. Maybe you relate to them as you try to help people you don't even really know who might be sick or in need. Maybe as a first responder in the medical profession or a volunteer. Maybe you relate to the good thief, Dismas, as you recognize and accept the suffering that comes from being human and as a disciple of Christ and still have hope. Maybe it's the Roman centurion. Again, we didn't hear about him today, but we know his role as you come to a realization and appreciation for the power and the gift of the cross in a new ways. Maybe we can relate with the side of failure. Do we relate with the bad thief? As we yell at Jesus, tell him to get himself and us, you, off the cross. Maybe Peter, as you maybe are tempted to deny your Christian identity as others attack what you stand for or question you. Maybe you're tempted to relate with Judas as you struggle with grave sin, or are tempted to despair that God's mercy is not enough and that your sin is too great to be forgiven, that you're not lovable. Or the other disciples who maybe they don't deny or betray Jesus, but they're nowhere to be found as you are distant from Jesus, or you're feeling neither hot nor cold, rather lukewarm. Whichever of these players in the Passion story that you might connect with the most, and there are others beyond the ones I've just mentioned, I suggest one other connection that we may have missed. Several years ago, I kind of came to a new revelation with this. I realized there was one person that I never tended to associate myself with in the Passion narrative. Never happened. But that I started to realize that in the story of the Passion, that I can relate very closely with this person. That really all of us as human beings relate with this person, whether we realize it or not. The one role we play today, we play every day, is Barabbas. We're Barabbas. You know, there we are. And next to the one who's been sentenced to death, we're the one are sentenced to death because of original sin, our fallen nature, our continued actual sin. And Jesus takes our place. Although it plays out, I think I would suggest, a little differently than the Passion we've just heard. I think it would sound a little bit more like this. When each of us is placed with Jesus before God, and Pilate says, "Who do you want me to release to you?" Instead of the crowd yelling, it is God who says, "Mine and your name," not Barabbas. Rich, Brian, Gary, Joyce, Nancy, Kathy. And when Pilate asks what to do with Jesus, instead of the crowd yelling, it is Jesus himself who whispers, "Crucify me."